If possible, let's come to order. Could the clerk read the roll? Call the roll.
Petrie,
Here.
Schrader. Esri,
Here.
Bergson, Harper. Kurtz. Langenheim.
Here.
Quorum's present.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same difference. Okay, we're ready for public.
Agenda.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. Okay, now we're ready for public participation. Or are we? Communications. Do we have any communication? No. Ah. Too many people have been clawing at my eyeballs today.
Did you want to instate the 5-minute
What?
limit? 5-minute limit?
We all, it's what's normally what, 5 or 3?
Well, you should announce it.
Okay. We're ready for public discussion. You will each have no more than 5 minutes. The first person I want to call is, what does that say?
Randy Hopkins.
What?
Randy Hopkins.
Randy Hopkins, please. Step up to the phone and turn on the
Button right in the front, turn the microphone on.
the microphone.
Please be sure to
My name is Randy Hopkins. I'm here for the map amendment on Hensley Road.
There's no question and answer.
Okay.
There no-
If you have anything to tell us.
We had our zoning approved last week from B3 to B4. I'm the half owner with my wife of Atlantic Services. We'd like to put a contractor warehouse on that property. And that's all I have, I guess.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Frank DeNovo. Is Frank here?
Just stepped out.
Well, how about Clark Bullard? He'll be outside. Oh, no, there he is. 5 minutes, Clark.
Okay. I live at 509 West Washington in Urbana, and I want to start out by reminding you that this resolution deals with a federal proposed rule to define EPA and the Corps of Engineers' jurisdictional boundaries over which waters in the United States it has jurisdiction over. And that's been under the Clean Water Act for 40 years, since 1972. The objectives of that act are to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters, to reach an ultimate goal of zero discharge of pollutants, and to make the waters fishable, swimmable, and suitable for public water supply. This two-page rule narrows the existing rule. The existing rule has a broad jurisdiction. This one narrows it in accordance with recent Supreme Court decisions. Defining jurisdiction, though, is different from issuing permits and actually regulating. It's like saying the highway department or government has jurisdiction over the highways, but when you want to decide what the speed limit should be or whether we should drive on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, you have a subsequent public process that goes through where all the stakeholders can have their say. This is only about should the feds have jurisdiction over waters that flow downhill, not groundwater, not isolated water that doesn't flow anywhere. So, and it also then narrows the definition that has been used for 40 years to exclude certain ditches, like the ditches alongside the roads that are built entirely in uplands and don't have water flowing in them year-round. Okay, those are specifically exempted. So that's the first thing. The second is that this rule is just about responsible behavior. We can decide as a nation, we have 40 years ago, that people should be responsible for discharging pollutants into waters that flow across their boundary onto somebody else's territory. And actually agriculture has gotten special treatment from day one on the Clean Water Act. Agricultural activities are categorically exempt. Runoff, polluted runoff of agrochemicals from cropland have always been exempt. They're still exempt. This rule doesn't even touch that. So there's a lot of misinformation floating around out there. And a lot of it is in the whereases on the resolution before you. Whereas number 4 says that ditches that flow only intermittently are likely to be regulated as if they were year-round flowing streams. Section B3 specifically exempts those ditches. Whereas number 5 refers to expansion of federal control over local activities within normally dry ditches. Section B3 exempts those ditches. Whereas number 6 says this would be an unfunded federal mandate that'll lay more costs onto the county. In fact, every ditch that is under current jurisdiction, under the current rule, is also going to be, the new rule is going to be a subset of those ditches. They're taking some ditches out. So, and the last whereas about this giving the federal government de facto zoning authority has absolutely no basis in fact. So this is really about common sense. It's about government clarifying jurisdiction over waters and making it explicit in plain English that it will not regulate pollution of upland ditches that do not flow year-round. So I have brought along a substitute resolution that asks you to file a comment in support of this federal rule, which makes things explicit that have not been very explicit before, that narrows jurisdiction in accordance with the Supreme Court, and I ask you to take an equally hard look at this. I'm astonished, or frankly, really surprised that this rule has been issued by EPA last April for public comment, and you guys are just getting it thrown at you at this very late hour. And it only went up on the web less than a week ago, and I heard about it through the grapevine. So I threw together with some friends a possible substitute regulation, and I ask that you give it equal consideration. Thank you. Shall I hand that out or what?
Good evening. My name is Lynn Warfel. I am currently the president of Champaign County Farm Bureau. We have about 2,500 farmer members here in Champaign County, total of about 10,000 members here in Champaign County. Illinois Farm Bureau has about 80,000 farmer members and about 400,000 total members just here in Illinois. Because of that, we have the ability to have a staff of attorneys who look at legislation, look at regulations, and analyze carefully those regulations and rules and laws. Our staff at Illinois Farm Bureau has looked at the proposed resolution carefully and analyzed it carefully with lawyers' eyes. And one of the huge challenges we all have nowadays is we're not lawyers. And stuff gets written in incredibly complicated ways. So we have larger and larger things coming at us, and we have a blizzard of things coming at them. The lawyers pick up on little things like navigable, one word that is removed from the current proposal. Because navigable is removed, that opens the door, the barn doors, to a whole lot of things. Farmers are exempt in some cases. For example, if you read carefully, like a lawyer would, if you farmed that land since 1977, you're exempt. I've been farming 52 years. Out of the 800 acres I farmed, none of it, not 1 acre, is land that I farmed in 1977. How many farmers are there that would be excluded because of that one little section in this whole thing? Well, we have given you in your packet a resolution that opposes this EPA, and we would appreciate your looking at it carefully and joining with Illinois Farm Bureau and Champaign County Farm Bureau to oppose this. The Champaign County Board, you folks all realize this, that's the town council for the rural areas. And so we really depend on you to help us when we have difficulties with the state and federal rules. Actually, I like to go back to Abraham Lincoln's era. He started his 1858 speech here in Illinois. It's called the House Divided Speech. He started that with, if we knew where we are and where we wanted to go, we could better figure out how to get there. So where are we? I'm telling you, since John Deere, back in 1837, invented the moldboard plow, we have changed dramatically. In my 52 years as a farmer, we have changed dramatically. I haven't used one of these in 15 years. I have one. It's sitting in tall grass out behind my shed, and I don't intend to be using it either. We have dramatically changed the way we farm today, and we don't want to see the federal government coming in to tell us how to farm. The intentions may be good, but there are a whole lot of things in today's world here in Illinois and at the federal government where the intentions may be good, but the actual results are five-star disasters. I want you to know that not only myself, but my fellow farmers care deeply about the environment, and I take a lot of pride in making sure what I'm doing is best for the environment and trying to learn and implement new farming techniques that will better utilize the resources that impact my small business. A small farming business today handles about $1 million in inputs. And maybe that's not a small business, but but it seems like it because we only get to keep a little tiny piece of that. And the more regulations that come in that impact that little tiny piece that we get to keep, the less we have. It's not a good direction. Well, I've installed on my farm, I've installed filter strips along the drainage districts that keep out sediment, that keep out nutrients from the water. I've put in grassed waterways in my fields to help with the sediment. I've done a lot of things at my own cost to reduce the amount of pollution that potentially can get into the water. Okay, well, I just very much want to encourage you to consider this resolution. And, you know, here's what it is. It's that thick. If you read the whole thing, it's that thick. It's not just 2 pages. It's what the 2 pages are attached to. It's huge. So thank you for listening to me. And if you have questions, be glad to visit with you later about this. It is a huge issue to us, and we stand very strongly in opposition to it. Thank you.
James Beauchamp, please.
Well, I just come to you as a concerned citizen. I've been concerned about runoff from farmland or residential for a long time. I think runoff is a big problem in the United States. The Mississippi River is no longer safe to swim in. The Gulf of Mexico suffers from oxygen deprivation due to phosphates and nitrates. So, you know, we have lots of streams, lots of little creeks, and they all flow into bigger rivers, and they eventually find their way down to the Gulf of Mexico or other bodies of water. And so this is a big concern for me. And just a few days ago, I heard about this new rule. I've tried to do some research on it. It's not too easy to figure out exactly what the rule does. But it's been vetted by the Prairie Rivers Network. And the people on the Prairie Rivers Network, I know, spend a lot of time with water issues. They are doing everything they can to ensure that we have clean water in Illinois. And they have vetted this rule. It's a bit of a puzzle to me because I just heard that the rule narrows what the jurisdiction is now. But I guess it really doesn't because of the Supreme Court decision, which is already made it narrow. So what they're trying to do here is clarify what the rules are. It must be somewhat in flux now. So they're trying to clarify it and make the regulation simpler. Now, it may affect different states differently, and we may be in a completely different situation than, say, Arizona or Colorado or California. But we're all Americans, so if it's a rule that benefits America, I think we should be for it. So that's what I have to say today.
Hi, I'm Scott Kessler. I farm in Champaign County. I farm ground where my mom grew up, and she would have been 90, but she remembers that we had a low area, and farmers with horses and plows dug that out, and later on steam engines came in and dug that out more. She remembers her and her sisters playing in this water, and when I grew up, we spent all of our time there. We'd ride rafts when the water was there. We were camping. The neighbors always met there. Every 2-3 years, the water would dry up. We'd walk it. In the winters, we would ice skate on it. My son played there, and maybe our grandkids will play there. It's not about clean water. We all want clean water, but it's about jurisdiction. And it's not just a Farm Bureau thing. The Illinois Chamber of Commerce, the Home Building Association, Illinois Manufacturing, Illinois Realtors, Illinois Electric Co-ops, they're all against the EPA rule. And also the Illinois Association of County Board Members and the National Association of Counties are against the new EPA rule. The National Association was afraid the rule would broaden the number of county-maintained ditches, such as roadside ditches that require clean water section 404 permits. And look in this area, you guys are going to have the Dewey Fisher Road. You're going to widen the road. You're going to dig ditches. You're going to put in new culverts. This isn't totally flat. There are hills. Some of these hills take water. The water goes down the drainage district. The drainage districts go to the bigger ditches. This could be a problem for you guys. It could be a problem for our townships that do work along the road. We'd like to see that the county be able to control this. You got a good county engineer in Jeff Blue. Let him and the townships do it locally instead of the U.S. EPA do this. And so we're asking you to support our resolution and oppose the new proposed rules, just like your national and state organizations have. Thank you.
Stuart Levy, please, or Levy.
All right. Stuart Levy of 1108 Foley Avenue in Champaign. Let's see. So I too am here to talk about the resolution opposing the EPA Waters of the U.S. rule. I guess there are several things that trouble me about it, and some of them are procedural. So, for example, there are a bunch of assertions made in this resolution that don't seem to be backed up by anything, of increased cost to the county, of expansion of jurisdiction, of a number of things that seem to be rebutted by what the EPA has written about this rule. But there's nothing here about that. The Farm Bureau has explained their objections to it, nationally and on the county level. A number of those seem to be rebutted as well. It just doesn't seem to be a very well thought out resolution on the one hand. Another is the basis of the resolution is expressed in terms of what it will trouble the county to deal with it if the proposed rule goes ahead. But the objections that we're hearing from the Farm Bureau sounds as though this rule, the objection is based on how it will affect the farmers of Champaign County. And that certainly would be a legitimate thing for the Champaign County Board to be concerned with, but then the resolution should say so. Should say that we were objecting to this proposed rule because of how it will affect the farmers here. And then it should be talking about things in terms that will affect the farmers and not in terms of installing signs in roadways and so forth. Let's see. As for other things, Clark Bullard has said a few of the things that I had thought to say far better than I would have said them. But I'll just point out that the Clean Water Act has indeed been around for a long time. It was narrowed in scope by Supreme Court rulings in 2001 and 2006, and this proposed rule is restoring narrowed portions of the original act with new restrictions worked out in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Agriculture that specifically exclude from waters of the U.S. Jurisdiction a lot of normal farming practices that the Farm Bureau seems to be concerned would be regulated anyway, even though the new rule specifically excludes them. So it seems ill thought out. It's addressed to the wrong audience. It doesn't seem to be based on fact, or at least if it is, the facts are not before you. I hope you will vote against this proposed rule.
Glynis Collins, please.
Good evening. I'm Glynis Collins, speaking on behalf of Prairie Rivers Network, which is located on 1902 Fox Drive over in Champaign. I brought along just a couple of newspaper articles with me tonight, and they'll be familiar stories to all of you. One from a national paper about Toledo's drinking water problems recently. One from the News Gazette, Beware of Bacteria, just a week or two ago, about how less than half of Illinois lakes are good for swimming because of water pollution. And of course, if we had time, we could sit here all night and talk about stories like this. These stories show us that despite a Clean Water Act, we still have tremendously urgent water pollution challenges in front of us. I was greatly concerned to see item 8B on your agenda tonight, the resolution about the proposed Federal Waters of the U.S. rule. I was concerned to see it because, as you've heard several people say before me, there's misinformation in that resolution. The federal proposed rule, as Clark Bullard has said before me, clarifies and somewhat narrows what's been being protected under the Clean Water Act since 1972, which stories like this tell us we haven't achieved our national goals yet. So And those clarifications that this proposed rule states were requested by the regulated community in order to provide greater regulatory certainty so that everyone would know what's in and what's out, and then everyone can go about their business. So you're hearing competing stories, competing views of the resolution and the rule itself. That's why I think it's extremely important, and I urge you to do your homework, to do more homework before coming out with any position on this proposed rule. The gentleman from the Farm Bureau earlier is right. It's very complicated. And I think an important place for you to start would be to see if you can find some independent experts to consult with who aren't with one side or with the other and can really clarify for you what the likely impacts to the county are going to be. And we urge you to do that due diligence. I was also alarmed, not just by the misinformation about the proposed rule in the resolution, but by the language in sections 2 and 4, which I see are essentially committing the county to joining a campaign against the Clean Water Act. Back to talking about newspaper headlines, what we'll be reading if the county board adopts this resolution as it's written now is the headline, Champaign County urges rollback of Clean Water Act. And when I'm talking about section 2 and 4, you're saying throw out the whole rule, coming out with a position that says throw out the whole rule. If you examine it and see things that you think should be improved, there's a public comment process. You can put those comments in. The agency's required to respond to you. I'd be delighted to see the county making those kind of constructive comments, but having a press conference about how the rules should be thrown out, I think, is not where the county wants to be. I don't think you want to be on that side of history. So we urge you to reject the resolution. Thank you.
I'm Russell Boer, and I farm over in the St. Joe Flatville area in Champaign County. I'm also on the IADD board, the Illinois Association of Drainage Districts, and we also oppose this like the county is talking here. Like I say, everybody wants clean water, everybody. Nobody's trying to do anything. You know, there's a lot of things happen, just like you just go back to November 17th, you have a tornado, things can happen, and then, you know, it's beyond anybody's control. So when the Prairie Rivers say something about something happening in Toledo or something, who knows what happens? You know, things happen. You know, it's beyond anybody's control. So things can happen and they can say anything they want. I think we got to just go with what you guys are doing here and oppose this, because right now there's too much, like Lynn Warfel says, there's too much in there that's it's unknown, and we need to protect what we're doing. People are doing what they need to do. Like Lynn says, everybody's doing everything they can to keep the waters of the United States as clean as they can out in the country. That's why people are on drainage districts, and people are paying taxes on this to do whatever they can to keep everything as good as they can and the systems working as good as they can. Thank you.
Is Frank DeNovo here?
Hi, Frank DeNovo. I live in rural St. Joe. I do know for a fact that I have wetlands on my property, so I am covered by this. I'd like to hand out, you know, people have said a lot of.
Right, just give it to him and he'll pass it.
A lot of things about what the rule does and what it doesn't do. What I've handed out there is I think probably one of the best and most even-handed descriptions of what's going on here. This is prepared by the Congressional Research Service for the House of Representatives. So I find it to be plausibly even-handed. These are people that work for John Boehner, so, you know, there isn't, you might want to grant this some credibility. But in any case, I do think it's a good resource. It's a lot easier to get through than those 88 pages in the Federal Register, I can tell you that. I'd like to just hit on just a little bit of history to clarify exactly what's going on, right? The Clean Water Act was enacted in 72, amended in 77. The roundabout 86 was the last rulemaking that the EPA had that had all of these provisions in here. And the orange tab on what I've given you is a really useful part of this document that gives you a side-by-side comparison of the current rules, which are the ones adopted in 1986, and the new ones, and then a discussion on the right-hand side of what the significance of that is. So subsequent to those 86 rules, we got these Supreme Court opinions. Obviously, the EPA had to change the way it operated. It did that by using administrative means. It uses these guidance memoranda to set new rules. Then that defines what the actual current practice of the EPA is. Because in the 1986 rule, there are these very specific items that are declared to be waters of the United States, and then there is this thing that says other waters, and that is an open-ended provision. That is an open-ended provision that allows the EPA to use its own judgment as to what other waters are. One of the principal things that they're doing with the new rule is to substantially constrain what is under the definition of other waters, right? So in fact, most of what they're writing is either exemptions or definitions. This is what the Congressional Research Service, how they summarize the effect of this change with respect to other waters. Current rules asserts jurisdiction more broadly than what is proposed. Generally, what the EPA is doing is to take their current administrative guidelines and put them into the rules. So this does not change the way that the EPA is currently operating today. And one of the things that it does do is it leaves us with an underlying administrative rule that is more restrictive than the current rule that is presently in existence, which is in some ways contradicts the Supreme Court decisions. So they have to fix this problem between this expansive rule and these decisions, which is what they're doing with this rulemaking. Just to touch on a couple of other things, this is only dealing with geographic jurisdiction, not subject matter, right? So the Clean Water Act, we have to remember what the Clean Water Act does. It does only specific things, right? It prohibits discharge of pollutants. It requires permits for certain kinds of pollutants if you're going to put them out through a point source, a discharge. It prohibits draining and filling of wetlands under a lot of conditions. It specifies when you have to take special measures to prevent oil spills and contain them, right? So this is what it does, right? Just because we're using the word jurisdiction doesn't mean that the EPA gets jurisdiction over everything. It only gets jurisdiction over those subjects, right? So when you talk about de facto zoning, which is mentioned in the resolution, that is extremely inaccurate. There's nothing in the rules, there's nothing in the Clean Water Act that supersedes local zoning. There is nothing in the rules or the Clean Water Act that looks at all like a zoning regulation. So it is extremely inaccurate to say that it does things like that. So the last thing that I want to do, I thought it was very interesting that Mr. Warfel made a point of saying, that the Farm Bureau staff had carefully studied the rule. All right? But this was brought to you at such a late moment, you know, that we're looking at, they're wanting you to take this to the county board immediately. Well, if the Farm Bureau staff needed to carefully study the rule, I would suggest to you that your staff needs to carefully study the rule and to give you an objective assessment, and I urge you to defer action on this until the staff can report to you in October. Thank you.
Speak. Can you bring me one of these things?
Sorry about that.
Sharon DeSalle.
Good evening. My name is Sharon DeSalle. I live in Urbana at 309 East Holmes. So I was surprised to find out about the Champaign County Board considering a resolution to oppose this EPA's proposed clarification. One of the biggest problems facing the entire planet right now is water scarcity. And water scarcity is quickly becoming a big problem for parts of this country. And although we here in East Central Illinois, for the most part, appear to have no significant shortage of water, water scarcity is not about a lack of access to water. Water scarcity is about a lack of access to clean water, a lack of access to drinkable water. The EPA's proposed Waters of the U.S. rule is an attempt on the part of the EPA to do a clearer and better job of protecting this country's drinking water. The EPA's proposed Waters of the U.S. rule specifically protects water that flows into sources of drinking water. I think it's pretty obvious that anything that flows into a source of drinking water could potentially pollute and contaminate that entire water supply. So this EPA ruling specifically attempts to protect drinking water from being rendered undrinkable because contaminated water has flowed into it. This is simply how a supply of drinking water needs to be protected. Drinking water needs to be protected from anything that is contaminated from flowing into it. So the proposed EPA ruling is simply mandating common sense protection of our drinking water. The entire reason the EPA was created was to protect our environment from pollution and contamination. The EPA's sole purpose is to protect our water, our land, our air, and thus to protect us, the people who drink this water, breathe this air, and live here. So as a citizen of this county, I really ask you, the members of this board, to please really think twice about opposing this effort on the part of the EPA to protect our drinking water. I would ask you to instead stand up for all of the people who live here and to please support the protection of our very precious, irreplaceable, and actually very limited supply of drinking water. Thank you.
Oh, you just gave me two more? William G. Neat?
My issue is not with this water thing, it's something else.
What? Neff? Neff. Sorry about that.
I've got an issue with the obnoxious weed control in my area, and I think it's all over the county, with Canadian thistles. And there's laws that was brought into effect in 1904 to control these. And it seems like that everybody, I mean, it's not any individual's fault, but there's not been people addressed to take care of these problems, and it's getting to be very, very severe. I mean, you've got people that buy bird feed and stuff to feed their birds, and then they got thistle seed in them. I've got ground that I farm. I can't put it to hay anymore because nobody will buy hay with thistles in it. So I have to put it to grass, and that's not a very desirable, marketable crop to try to get anything out of. I've got it growing in my front yard now from across the road where I live. People come out and build subdivisions across from me and no control over it. They want everything left wild, and then they plant seeds of pretty flowers or wide flowers, and it's getting infested with Canadian thistles, and it's all blowing over on me. I called the U of I County Extension Office, and the lady sent me out information that one thistle head can produce anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000 seeds, and it can germinate within 4 to 10 days after it strikes the ground. You can't, you can mow this off and keep the top off of it, but you can't have it floating in the air when you're doing that. It says in the laws it's not to be mechanically dealt with, and once it's gone to seed, I mean, I confronted this, a month and a half ago, and now the seed's all over, it washes down on my ground from ground north of me, and it contaminates my waterways, and I can't, I mean, I don't know what I can keep mine mowed off and keep them sprayed, but when there's an infestation that's way further than anything I can control across the road from me, and it seems like you mentioned this to people and they don't even know what it is. I had to take samples of this into the Champaign County Extension Office to get it identified. Nobody that was dealing with this even knew what a Canadian thistle was. And you can't walk out there in a little area and stand there and look at it. You got to walk out in it. And I mean, I walk it and I see the mess it's in. And I think something needs to be done to start getting this under control. It's something that we very seldom seen when I was a kid, and now it's getting to be a mass infestation. And there's laws and guidelines that's supposed to be set up through the state of Illinois to take care of this problem. And it's just getting way out of hand, and I think that we need to do something about it. One other issue, I don't know where I can state this or not, my wife is a school bus driver for Fisher School District. They built a subdivision across the road from me. It's got a cul-de-sac in it. She's got a bus, you can't turn around, and there's backing up. And I hope it don't come to the point that she backs over some child before they widen that cul-de-sac so a school bus can turn in it. I brought this to the attention of Mr. Hall. He come out and looked at it. We referred it to the transportation director, and she was told to get a hold of the road commissioner. Well, nothing's ever happened. I hope that it don't come to the point she backs over somebody before anything's done about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neff. Now, is there anyone else out there that wants to talk? Don't be shy. Okay. Public input is over with. Communications. Does anybody have a communication? Okay, item 7, for information only. I'll read it off. The residential electronics recycling collection that was previously scheduled for October 11th has been canceled because the contractor has withdrawn. And this says no more than that. Item 8, items to be approved by ELUC.
I'd like to make a comment here before we jump into the next issue. Susan, I see you here. I'm just curious, can we get another contractor? I mean, has it been successful? I thought he was pretty happy with the results.
It's a statewide phenomenon, and we'd like to go out to bid again in October and gear up for the first of the year to have a collection or two occur in the spring. Because in the spring, manufacturers are still trying to reach their quota. And until the state fixes the quota problem, we're going to just shoot for having one or two collections in the spring. So we're just going to go rebid. We're going to come back to the Finance Committee in October and request to go out to bid again.
Thank you.
Susan, sorry to learn this, but thank you for telling us about this situation. In between times, even though you have steps laid out that you're going to follow up on, what are your plans to get out to the public the information that you've provided for us as alternatives until such time that you can get back in place a
Well, so far,
program?
we've distributed cards and a press release. We have some money left to publicize options to residents from our grant. So we're going to try to
Okay.
spend that off and have a commercial maybe or some kind of just publicity campaign.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
All right. Item A, items to be approved by ELUC. Item A, case 721-AM-14- recommendation to approve a zoning amendment to change the zoning district designation from B3 Highway Business to B4 General Business, Randy and Sue Hopkins Atlantic Services Incorporated.
Second.
Any discussion of this matter?
Yeah, I have a question for you. I was looking at the comments. John, the ZBA has not had final approval for this yet. Are we being premature? Is there a rush, or why are we receiving this on the agenda now before ZBA approves?
The ZBA took final action last Thursday night.
Oh, they did?
The case was delayed due to a very low turnout at the previous ZBA meeting, and I had told the Hopkins that I would go ahead and put it on the ELUC agenda so that that delay wouldn't affect.
All right, so it is approved?
It has been approved. There were no
Okay.
changes.
All right, because I didn't get any update on that.
I would like to point out that the ZBA did include one condition on this map amendment. It's about the right to farm resolution. It's a standard condition we use. I forgot to include that in the memo.
Thank you, John.
There you go. Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. At this point, I'd like to call about a 10-minute intermission. 10 minutes? I have a did anybody leave?
It was a fast 10 minutes, Patsy.
Yeah, I have a fast watch, new watch.
Mr. Hall and I were consulting.
Well, go ahead, take some more minutes if you want to.
As we get older, time goes much quicker than we're used to. You know,
Thank you.
it goes very fast. It goes very fast.
Thank you so much. That's because you have so little of it left. Okay. Item 8B. Are we all lined up in the same direction now? Item 8B, resolution to oppose the expansion of the federal definition of waters of the United States to include non-navigable ditches and storms water flows in communities.
So moved.
Is there any discussion?
John, did you want to discuss it or not?
Come on, John.
If he doesn't want it, it's okay. I'd like to speak to it.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. As you can see, we first of all, this was dropped on my desk less than a week ago. Trying to get with John. John has had so much work on his desk, he hasn't had a chance. This is an 88-page document that came to us. Besides the fact that I've been getting inundated with new information, both from NACO, from the Farm Bureau, from Prairie Rivers Network, concerning certain aspects of the resolution, I haven't really been able to take the time that is really necessary to make a thorough look at this issue. I think honestly, that as you talk about it, there might be zoning issues that we've heard that might be in this regulation or may not be. The point is, what I'd like to do is, because of the fact that, and I'm pretty thorough, try to be thorough when I look at both sides of an issue, that I feel that this is very complex. It takes a little bit more time to address it, and I'd like to make a motion, amendment to this motion, to defer this to the next ELOC meeting while the staff can look over it, while we can look over it, and so that, or maybe even the Farm Bureau might want to look at some of the issues that have been brought up before us tonight. I'd like to look at both of these resolutions, but I really think we need to have a little bit more exhaustive study on what just dropped on our desk less than a week ago. So I'm not sure if you all agree, but I certainly would like to make a motion to defer to next month so that we can get more information and take some time to do that. John?
If I may, Mr. Chair. Before you defer, just make a few comments.
That's what I was asking. That's what I said, John, when it was discussion time. I said, John, would you like to make a few comments? And you didn't say anything, John. Would you like to make a few comments?
Mr. Chair, I never want to get in your way, so I knew you were
Do
literally
we have-
jumping at the
Do we
bit.
have a second to that motion?
Well, I'd asked for him to hold
No,
that.
I'm going to
till
hold off on because he has he'd like to make a statement under the main motion.
Just a few comments, if I
Okay,
may.
fine.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, I'll try to be brief.
We only follow the rules when it's
Well,
convenient.
whose clock, Ms. Petrie? I think your clock probably will run a little faster than time in Oslo. But anyway, I wish this would have come to this board's attention sooner. So that process, what Mr. Kurtz just mentioned, could have happened a little quicker. But nonetheless, here it is. It's on the agenda, and we're here to discuss it. And I'm pretty sure it's probably going to pass. The deferral will pass. I don't have a disagreement with that. I think if more of the board members here need more time to deal with it, I think and if staff would care to take a look at it, I think it'd be pretty instructive. I want to thank Frank DeNova. He's well known around here for bringing information forward. He's very well versed on a few things that I've known in the past, and I appreciate him bringing those comments here because I know Frank will try to be in the middle of things, not the one side or the other. At least he tries to be. But that's been my experience with Frank, so thanks for bringing it in. Because we've obviously had two sides on this. And I'm a biased participant in this also, too, as I'm a farmer. But I want to be clear on one point that was made by Mr. Warfel and a few other, and that's this ag exemption that keeps coming up, which is not an exemption. It probably won't even affect 95% of the farming community out here. So I find that rather dubious when that's brought up. It's pretty explicitly clear that if you haven't had control of a piece of farm property since 1977, then you have no exemption from this. So from the rule, that is, that the EPA is proposing. And I also find it interesting, too, that as we see what keeps coming out of our federal government, how anything could come out, especially the EPA, that's absolutely clear, is rather troublesome for me to believe. And I know we've heard of some stories tonight. We've all heard about the blooms in Lake Erie and affecting the water in Toledo, Ohio, and another story. But there's also the flip side of those stories, too. I became aware of a story of a rancher out in Wyoming by the name of Andrew Johnson, who, like his neighbors, decided to build a stock pond on his ranch that he owned. And he got all the proper local and state permits to build this pond, and come to find out, he got a notice from the EPA that said, you're in violation of the Clean Water Act, and you need to turn that land back in the way it was within 30 days, or you will face a fine of $178,500 per day. Now, usually when things come out of Washington, they're boilerplate. They don't really care about what goes on in Wyoming or what goes on in Illinois. This stuff's usually boilerplate stuff. And that's rather disturbing. Even the state governor, the governor of Wyoming, got involved with this. He saw how egregious that this rule that came from the EPA is a ruling, not so much the clean water rule, but it was a ruling from the EPA that came out that was so draconian that 30 days or we're going to destroy you. So I'm a little bit dubious about anything that comes out of Washington with this kind of this kind of backing. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I will support, if Mr. Kurtz moves, I'll support the deferral.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz, for waiting so I can make some comments on the original motion. It is a complex issue. I'm sorry Mr. Warfel has already left because I was going to match him thickness of file to thickness of file. So, Mr. Kessler, please tell him that. It is a complex issue, and there is a lot of information out there for us all to be reading and to understand about this rule. And I've done due diligence besides this wonderful packet of information. I have attended both of the seminars provided by the Illinois Farm Bureau and presented at our local Farm Bureau on their perspective on the rule, and I listened to the webinar that the EPA presented about the clarification of the rule and the procedures for making comments to the rule. And the thing that we need to be thinking about is the fact that what is being done, as Mr. Bullard and actually Mr. DeNovo mentioned, this is a federal level rule. It isn't just something that pertains solely to Champaign County. So even though we look at it from our own concerns here in our county, I think if we are doing really true due diligence, that we have to remember that this applies to across the United States, and geographically we're all very different. So the application across the United States will vary. So for us to narrowly say this doesn't work for us, I'm not sure that this is quite appropriate if we are not saying how does this apply across the United States and for the greater good of water throughout our country, not just our own sole issue. And as Mr. Levy, I believe it was, pointed out, the resolution does not directly say for Champaign County. And so then the question becomes, should we as a county board be looking at such a resolution that since it does not pertain solely and only to our county rather than something that applies across the United States? For all of these reasons, and so that we will have much more time to look at this and analyze it, I would be in support of Mr. Kurtz's motion, which he clearly intends to make. But I would ask Mr. Kurtz, when you make your motion, if you would include in that motion not only giving us more time to study it, but also, if possible with staff time, if staff could advise us what would be the implications of this rule on their own time. I did have some exchanges with Mr. Hall, and he shared some thoughts. He's here, he can speak for that himself. And I also asked some questions of Jeff Blue. Jeff isn't here, but he would be another person that we might want to get some input from. And does this, as they look over what the implications are for our county, does this bring anything new into the jurisdiction? Does it eliminate some things, what we are looking at? And we have our own water policies, and we have the MS4, so it's all very convoluted, and I would like to have our staff this would be basically 30 days for them to come back and give us some advice from that perspective. So thank you very much.
This is all irregular. I will take your comments regarding your motion as offering a motion, and I will take her comments as a second.
Okay, but I have a statement to make on the main motion as well.
On
Okay?
the main motion?
On the main motion, that we have not yet gone to the deferral motion. I haven't made that yet.
Your motion was a motion to defer.
Well, no, I pulled back on that so we could still discuss the main motion. And 2 points I want to make. I agree with Patsy on her wanting to get more information from staff and how it might affect Champaign County. I also agree with John. I've had what you would call sometimes a contentious issue with Illinois EPA and US EPA concerning the Muhammad Aquifer Consortium and the Muhammad Aquifer situation. I don't particularly am enamored of the EPA and how they go about doing some of their job, but I think we certainly... What's that? So with that said, I'd like to make a motion to defer this issue to the next ELOC meeting, have staff take a look as we have directed them to see what the ramifications will be on Champaign County and how we might be able to take some time to review a little bit more of this information.
Patsy, may I take your comments as a second?
Patsy's a second,
It's been moved
okay.
and seconded that it be deferred.
So now we need
It's been moved and
discussion on deferral.
It's a discussion on the deferral.
Aaron has been trying for a while.
Well, I guess ultimately, yeah, I don't have a real problem with deferring it, but knowing that the comment section is coming up in October, if we're going to do anything, next month is it, definitely. I know we're on the deferral, but I tend to agree with John that rules and regulations that come out of Washington, D.C. sometimes just hit like a hammer. I mean, that's it. And they don't hardly take into effect how it affects the little guy out here. And I read all the time. I know I'm getting a little off the deferral, but I'll make it real quick. I mean, just brought up algae blooms. Well, I hear all the time of cities that when they get a rain that isn't necessarily even a big rain, they're allowed by the Clean Water Act to just dump raw sewage into the lakes, streams, rivers, wherever. I just saw an article today, some of the algae blooms in Ohio, not that this is the whole cause, but some people are pointing to the Canadian geese, the rapid increase in the number of Canadian geese that are living on the lakes and the water grass and such that have been encouraged to be planted by the EPA, filter strips and everything. Well, every time that goose goes to the restroom, there's a little pile of manure there, and that manure has phosphorus and phosphate in it, and guess what? It's right there by the water, and get a rain and it washes right into the water. It's not just their city. It affects everyone. Everyone does want clean water, but regulations. There's the saying that everyone's heard: the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and sometimes regulations they're started out as good intentions, but they can get taken to an extreme, and that's all I have to say.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I would like to ditto Aaron and Mr. Schrader there. How we can ever trust anything that comes out of Washington, D.C. is beyond my scope. I think one of the words I heard tonight was common sense. Common sense. John Jay said it at the Muhammad Aquifer. Who with any common sense would put a dump over the aquifer? The same thing boils down here. As Mr. Warfel stated, most farmers that I know are tremendous stewards of the ground. there is probably more runoff of chemicals and whatnot coming out of the concrete and asphalt in a town than what we're doing. And just to let government sit there and get their foot in the door, and then on down the road, they're gonna try to crank down on us. And, people in Champaign County better remember, this was swamp ground at one time. So I just hope, I have nothing against deferral, but I hope everybody realizes what regulations can do to us. And other than Al and Mr. Langenheim or whatever, I'm the oldest one here, and in 1977. Oh, and Patsy, I forgot Patsy, yes, Patsy.
Hold on, this is not gender
Okay, yeah.
specific. If we
But
don't mind.
if this exemption doesn't mean anything to us.
You trying to get on her good side? Is that
Well,
what that is?
I've tried a long time, 2 years now. But if this exemption goes back to 1977, well, I don't want people to know what I was doing in 1977 because it wasn't farming. So anyway, I'll go along with the deferral, but I hope common sense comes in on this.
Aye. Turn on your microphone, Ralph, please. Thank you. Yep. There you go.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, now, are we done with this? No further? Okay. Monthly report.
It's on file.
It's on, okay, we just put it on file? Okay, fine. Any other business?
Mr. Langenheim,
Yes, sir.
if I may. Just, and John, I don't want to be premature, stop me if you want me to stop, but what Mr. Neff brought in today about noxious weeds, the history of that has always been there's provisions, statutory provisions that, you know, we could establish and have in the past a noxious weed officer. And Mr. Hall's communicated with me, we might pursue that in some way or nature. So I know, Mr. Neff, that won't help you right away with your Canadian thistle problem, but we are looking into it, and yes, you are correct. If we so deem as a county board to either appoint or hire, I doubt if we can hire, we don't have any money, so probably appoint, plead, somebody. We talked about this before, too, when Mr. Moser was on the board, about maybe getting somebody from the Weed Science Department from the University of Illinois to kind of help us out. But I think it's imperative we probably should have one. I know Canadian thistle is pretty prevalent. It used to be pretty bad on the interstate highways. Of course, there's nothing we can do with that, basically. But, you know, shatter cane's another noxious weed, too, but there's some other ones, but Canadian thistle's the worst. So hopefully in the future, we'll have something in the future, I hope. Thank you.
Quick. I just asked Mr. Hall, this isn't necessarily the only issue with like obnoxious weeds that we've had this year brought forward to you, is it? Wasn't there one down in the Broadlands area, something like that? Or,
Yes,
yeah,
I've had complaints from the area of Mr. Neff's property and one in Broadlands.
yeah, just bring forth, it's not like it's only up in your area either, so.
It's probably.
We do have legal recourse on noxious weeds, right? Don't we?
There is a rule system set up by statute, but the county has never done everything that rule requires.
Oh,
It's really pretty extensive, the system that the state requires.
okay. So it's been beyond our capacity to act.
So far, we just let people know that they're in violation, and 4 out of 5 people have followed through.
Okay, semi-annual review of closed session minutes. Have we got those around here anywhere?
The recommendation of the state's attorney is to maintain them all as closed pursuant to your resolution on the maintenance of closed session minutes.
I would move I'd move to accept that recommendation by the state's attorney to maintain the status quo.
Second.
To fit it in my
Okay.
words.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's handled. Okay, items to be placed on the consent agenda, 8B, 8A, excuse me, and I think that's it. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, keep your mouth shut.